Okay, so somehow it's time for another Q&A video already. I don't know, sometimes the months just fly by when you're having so much fun. So this is September's Q&A. The Q's come from folks on Patreon. The A's come from me. They're just my perspective, just based on my personal experience, my UPG, my understanding of plant lore, and my personal explorations of plant spirit work. So they're just my opinion, but hopefully you find them helpful and inspiring, and they take you wherever they take you. So some really good ones this month. One of them includes a book review, which I know lots of you folks love. So we'll talk about a book today. It's one of my faves. First question from Sharon. This is a very important question. I really should, most of the questions that come in, actually, I should turn into entire classes. So it's in the back of my mind. If I ever run out of ideas, this is where I'm going to start getting them from. Sharon wanted to talk about how to not self-sabotage, suffer from imposter syndrome, or feel yourself that you have become mentally unwell, or the flip side of that, worry about other people thinking you've become mentally unwell as your visionary spiritual journey unfolds. In other words, how to trust the process and allow it to be what it is without, assuming that something's wrong or worrying that something's wrong because you're having experiences that defy the status quo. And I think that's really the most important root of this question, is that we have sort of been conditioned into believing that when people have these non-ordinary or non-usual experiences, rather than celebrating the non-ordinary experience, we assume there must be something wrong with the person experiencing it, right? We're very quick to say, oh, that person is mentally unstable, or they must be taking drugs, or they're making it up, or it's all in their head. Like, we have this barrage of garbage that we can throw. And the funny thing to me is that most of the time we throw that at ourselves, right? It's very rare that I've seen, even online, even on Reddit, somebody, just come for somebody's experience and say, oh, you're just, you're up in the night. Whereas we're really good at doing it to ourselves. So I think that this issue tends to be most obvious the way that we kind of cut ourselves down. So how can we not do this? First, and actually really the only bit of advice that I have, because this is what I do and it's been the only thing that I found that worked, because this is stuff that I absolutely deal with even now. I don't think that that critical inner voice ever goes away. I think it just gets quieter, and I think eventually it just becomes a voice in the room that's not the loudest and not one that you really care about. So that's good. So here's what I do. I try to remind myself that it doesn't matter. And I come back to this a lot. I have this phrase written throughout my grammars, throughout my notebooks, in some of the notes in my phone. It doesn't matter. If what I am experiencing is coming from the vaults of my own subconscious, from my own inspiration, pieced together from the lexicon of my own internal symbolism, or if it is being hand-delivered to me by my ancestors, by the plant spirits, by the deities that I align myself to, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if the inspiration is helpful, if the guidance, the wisdom is meaningful, if the direction leads you to success, really, the real truth is, who cares? It doesn't matter if it's you or the gods, if you are having a lapse into non-ordinary mental states that other people would consider problematic, but it's working out really well for you. It doesn't matter. And I just remind myself all the time, I personally do believe that a great deal of my inspiration, if not most of it, comes from blessings from the plant spirits that I work with and the deities that I'm aligned to. Of course, it can feel like me a lot because that's how this works, but things come up and come through that I simply cannot take credit for, and don't fit in with the normal way that I put thoughts together and have ideas and come up with problem solving. So, but when I find myself second guessing it, I tell myself, hey, it ended up being a really cool thing. It was really powerful. It was really helpful. It was really effective. It was really interesting, whatever the case may be. So who cares? And I use that who cares to disengage with the critical dialogue, to just say like, I'm not even going to think about it. I know what my experience was. So who cares? I'm letting it go. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, I think this is something that we deal with a lot, and it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate byproduct of living in a culture, living in a society that, as a general rule, does not support those of us doing these more wild workings. Whereas in days gone by, maybe that would be different, or in some cultures in the world, this stuff is really celebrated, and people who want to go out into the sticks, literally and proverbially, in spiritual ways, are supported and nourished, and their experiences are nourished. But a lot of us certainly don't have that experience, and so this critical negativity comes up because we are not ethically or spiritually aligned to the culture in which we are living, is what that boils down to. So, great question. Thank you so much. Question from our friend Pip. What about changing practices, changing offerings to suit the season? So we're kind of, nudging into winter. Things are starting to slow down, cool down. The shorter days are really, really obvious where I am. It's getting dark so early, like all of a sudden. So how can we, or how should we maybe, change what we bring to the spirits, what we do in our work to be in harmony? So the first thing is that when we come to work in a devotional way, when we're expressing love and devotion and really trying to show up for our allies, whether they be deity, plant, or ancestor, or nature spirits, I think of, what's valuable, what's practical right now, that maybe, making offerings that have warmth or spiciness, or feelings of comfort, because those are the things we also crave in this season, and we are animals and we are part of. So I think about moving our offerings into warm drinks and herbal teas and hot spirits and fresh baked bread and lots of spices and aromatic things, and even colors that we work with that get warmer to harmonize with the cold, dark weather. So that's one way that you can do it, is offer your allies the things that have become valuable to you as the weather changes, as we move into this darker season. I think that, there was also an aspect of this question I really liked, of the ritual practices, the petitionary practices that, if we're acknowledging that the trees are resting, are sleeping, but we're coming to them, and ringing our bells and lighting our incense and kind of ask them to do a lot, are we disturbing their sleep? And should we be, making our rituals quieter and maybe a little less expressive? And actually, I do think there's room for that. The plant spirits, even though they rest, are never asleep. They're never far away from us. They become more invested in their world during this time of year. Sorry, the dog shaking. And they become, it can feel like they're more distant from us because oftentimes their physical expression on our side of the hedge is gone, has fallen and been composted and turned back into the soil, or harvested or whatever. But they're still very present, and so we should never hesitate to call on them and feel like we're disturbing their sleep, because they don't sleep, they just are experiencing their exhalation process, and they are moving down into their roots, into their own world of mystery, but they are still very accessible. That being said, I do think that these darker months, these colder months, when, for a lot of us, it's not as easy for us to spend time outside. The garden gets packed up and put away. And this, for where I live, the snow comes and it comes heavy and it gets cold. So our work should reflect, that. And there are people who live places where winter doesn't mean anything. It is, it's just as warm in December as it is in June. So, those people can change, in their own ways. But for me, wintertime becomes more about introspection, about study, about rest, about cleaning, and recognizing that because I'm going to be spending so much less time out of doors and there's a lot less to do, less festivals, less walking around, it affords me more time for study, for more time for doing personal work, for kind of getting in and doing those shadow workings that really just feel easier, more lubricated this time of year, and calling on the plant spirits who do show up during this time of year. So I think about some of our late fall deciduous trees. I think about, of course, the evergreens, that there are plant spirits who maintain a stronger connection with this side of the hedge in winter because they can. It's part of their mythos, it's part of their expression to hold fast to their forms even when there's very little sunlight and it's very cold. It teaches us also how to hold fast to our power when we are in situations that are challenging or don't have the nourishment that we need or the support that we need. Working with those evergreen plants, these plants that are sort of famously associated with time of year, the pine, the holly, the ivy, these allies can invite us into a darker kind of ritual, a darker kind of meditation where we really lean into contemplating the birth that lies hidden in death, that we contemplate the fertility that lies hidden in compost and rot. So there's that side of the plant spirit work too, that it's not always sunny and happy. Sometimes it's an opportunity for us to confront and face these bigger topics that can be a little scary, a little uncomfortable, but very important, because if we deal with them, they don't have power over us, which is good because they shouldn't, right? It's just part of it. Another great question. How about incorporating animals into plant spirit work, especially those animals that have or like directly support plant spirit cycles, right? So we think about pollinators. We think about, Pip was bringing up squirrels and how squirrels play such an important role to the life cycle of many trees, the gathering of nuts, the burying of nuts. Obviously, they don't harvest every nut they bury, so they end up burying seeds, which then can sprout and grow into trees. Like, it's a pretty cool situation. I think this is a very neat angle to consider. There's a lot of lore around this. I think about, I don't remember the details enough to really recite it verbatim, but it's a cool story to go look up. The relationship in Norse mythology between the squirrel and the world tree Yggdrasil, and how the squirrel, if I remember correctly, is kind of considered to be a little bit of an agent of chaos, a troublemaker. So I'll have to go look that up. But yeah, look up the squirrel in Yggdrasil. There's some cool stories there. Of course, we see so many instances of agrarian deities or deities of the wild, deities whose domain is the forest or the garden, or plants or plant medicine or plant magic, also being associated with insects and animals that are pollinators or who live a great deal of their time in trees. So songbirds and squirrels, butterflies, bees, of course. I mean, bees show up. I think about the Dionysus and Bacchus, the importance of bees for making honey, honey for fermenting for creating alcohol. they show up, and oftentimes it's subtle. And I even think about a lot of the symbolism for like the foliate heads, the green man heads that appear all over the place, that oftentimes there are songbirds, being presented there, or sometimes antlers, stag horns. So there's a lot of opportunity here to consider how to honor the animal spirits that are in symbiosis with our plant spirit allies, and how to expand maybe our palette a little bit, and to recognize that for a lot of us, the plant spirits are our focal. We kind of put a lot of our energy into working with plants, but that the nature spirits, the spirits of place, all deserve our love. And that definitely includes the animals and insects, because they're very attuned to our level. They have physical bodies and lifespans and cycles that are similar to ours. And we interact with them all the time, and they're really sharing so much space with us, and sometimes we don't even realize how much our tracks overlap. When I leave my house in the morning, the squirrels are out on the fence, waiting for me to bring them peanuts, waiting for the attention, and kind of the rest of the day while I'm gone, they're doing whatever they do. But our paths, our tracks intersect for a moment. For a moment, we share space in this really intentional way, and then for the rest of the time, we share space in a non-intentional way. So I think to be close with them, especially any that really catch your eyes, like everybody knows I love the squirrels, right? And I see them as beings who live in the trees, literally, that they have this really beautiful relationship with trees and with the tree life cycle. Even the way that their fertility and their kittens are raised around where trees are in their growing patterns. So bringing those allies into your work, I think, is very important and very cool. So great question. Thank you. Let me know what you come up with. If anybody's working with animal spirits in a similar way they work with plant spirits, or in conjunction, I'd love to hear about it. Finally, somebody asked for a book recommendation that would focus on sacred reciprocity, making offerings, the inner mechanics of offerings, how offerings work, some lore and history around offerings, mostly from the Celtic lands, but just the idea in general, because I think what happens is folks get into practicing sacred reciprocity of gifting and receiving, to gift to receive, to gift to receive, and they feel the power in it, and they find their magic changes, and they find the way they're engaging changes. And so this becomes a very fascinating topic. There are a lot of books actually that I could recommend, but I wanted to pick one that I could really highlight. Aside this one, please read everything that you can get your hands on by Claude Leceouteaux. Very, very important information, very, very inspirational and informative for the work that I do. A lot of the things that I've shared over the years have been in part probably rooted in stuff that I learned from reading Leceouteaux. So Claude Leceouteaux, read everything, highly suggested. The book that I want to share with you today, though, is Kirk S. Thomas's Sacred Gifts. I know this is going to show up backwards, but Sacred Gifts, Reciprocity and the Gods, written by Kirk S. Thomas, who I don't know if still is, but it was at one point the Archdruid of Arndriach Fine, ADF. He may be Archdruid Emeritus now, I don't know. Another author who shares that position with him would be Ian Corrigan. Also recommend reading everything Ian Corrigan has written. Sacred Gifts is all about reciprocity, the give and take of life, and how the religions of the ancient world relied upon this gift exchange to even exist. Just as people give to each other in life, so may we give to the gods and spirits, expecting blessings in return. Really beautiful book, not particularly big, 205-ish pages, and really picks this apart from the perspective of Celtic lore, from the perspective of Kirk's modern neo-pagan druidry, from the perspective of world religions, and how this one act of devotion, this one thing that we do of gifting in order to receive, in order to gift, brings us into this endless sacred cycle of reciprocity. And this is very, very powerful and very, very important. And as folks trying to embody an animist perspective, as folks trying to engage more deeply with the world and shake off the conditionings of human supremacy, of exceptionalism, of escapism, this practice will get you there quickly. It's a fast track, and it feels good and it feels right. So, Sacred Gifts, highly recommended. You can order this through, I think, probably the ADF bookstore, but I think you probably can get it. It's everywhere, wherever books are, wherever you get your books. So, thank you so much for all the awesome questions. Let's do this again, same time, same place next month. Again, I put a question call out on the 20th of every month on Patreon for patrons of all levels, and you just get to respond to that post and put your questions in, or send me something privately if you don't want me to say your name. And your question will likely end up in one of these videos unless I just respond to it directly. And so these come from you. And again, a lot of times they give me ideas for my Friday classes. So I very much appreciate it. And I love just engaging with people more directly and seeing what people are thinking about and what they're experiencing and what they're struggling with. Like, all of this is important. So thank you so much. If you want to come join us over on Patreon, the link's down in the comments, as well as my book recommends are down there, so that if you didn't take notes, I'll take them for you. And I look forward to seeing you for October's Q&A. Take care.